Welcome back, everybody. I'm Drew,
I'm Ryan.
and today on Nifilmism, we are going to talk about what we've considered in just close discussion, the three surviving spy franchises.
Those being, of course, James Bond,
Yes, Bond is always going to be there, even regardless of quality. I think.
Jason Bourne.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's been a year
Are they
or
trying to do
two,
another one?
I don't know. But you know what? It's still fresh enough that we can talk about it.
I think it revitalized the genre a bit. It informed what became the new Bond.
And Mission Impossible.
Surprisingly, yes.
So where do we want to start?
Where do you want to go?
Oh shit!
What's fresh at the top on your head? I mean, we could start with. Actually, we could start with. I have not seen the new Mission Impossible yet,
I have.
but I think we can agree that other than two, which we could probably talk about a little bit further, they've been consistently good.
It's a weird curve because you start pretty high at the top of what at the time were better spy movies. I mean, the whole scene where they got to get into Langley, it's iconic to the point that
Yes.
the entire first episode of Archer is just is just
A rip
just
on
a
that
rip off.
because everybody's seen it, yeah.
Exactly. So you go from what was, I thought, an excellent reboot of a TV show that nobody cares about from decades prior, and it turns it into its own blockbuster franchise. So it dips quite a bit for number two, and then slowly starts to curve back upwards.
Yeah. And what you kind of get from it, granted, I haven't watched Mission Impossible in a long time, is it wasn't necessarily set up for sequels because it came out in what, 97?
Yeah, 96, 97,
And
right
it wasn't
in that
really
era.
an era where you were pre-planning. That's such a more modern aspect that you get with films. I mean, it was open-ended in that sense, but it wasn't like a direct lead into what are they going to do next. And there was it till 2002, 2001 when 2 came out, or was it?
Yeah, so you're talking at least a 5, 6 year gap at that point.
Yeah.
So it was not something that, like you said, was intended for
Yeah.
any sort of
So
sequels.
it basically created a consistently, I wilt there, a consistently good franchise off of what was intended to be a standalone. Hey, we have the rights to this property that we haven't had anybody care about in 30 years. Let's, see what we can do with it. And Mission Impossible 1 is still probably the best.
Yeah, I thought that too until seeing the fifth one.
Oh, really?
I'm gonna put the
Yeah, but
fifth
how much
one-
of that is reliance on the world that's been created?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
But just quality wise, in terms of everything you want out of a spy movie, in
Yeah.
terms of neat, just set pieces that don't get boring.
That's one thing they definitely do a good job of like you said, the repelling into the clean room.
Yeah.
They found out ways to do that in nearly every movie differently to where it's like the action set piece that, yeah, you get teased a bit in the trailer, but it's always an integral part of the main mission, and it's different enough
I think
every
it's
time.
Rogue Nation, I think, where they do the underwater one.
Yeah. Or was that the Burj Khalifa one?
I'd have to go back.
Yeah.
It all sort of blends together, but usually if I'm saying it all sort of blends together, I'm complaining about a franchise that just all feels the same. This is just, oh, hey, which was the movie with an awesome set piece? All of them.
Yeah.
And I'm not complaining about it. It's just, I watched them all in rapid succession recently, and it does blend together because I watched them all within a
Yeah.
few weeks. I think Burj Khalifa was the fourth one. That would be Ghost Protocol.
Yeah.
And then I think Rogue Nation was the fifth one. And speaking of Rogue Nation, it set up the Syndicate,
Yeah.
which, even though it's not the best name ever, is one of the neater, actually more fleshed out criminal organizations in movie history, I think, at this point.
So you mean there's not a "it was me all along" moment?
Yeah, no. But it... Oh, wait, are you talking about the Christopher Nolan thing?
No. I was talking about something that's relevant to what we'll get into when we talk about Bond, and where that may have failed, even though it's on better legs now than I think it was until 95 when GoldenEye came out, or 94.
Yeah, let's switch gears and just talk about Bond, because Bond at this point you can almost look at as two separate franchises.
The interesting thing about Bond is we were born in the dead zone.
Yeah.
There was a very real possibility if GoldenEye hadn't come out, there would never have been a Bond movie after the last Dalton Bond movie, which would have been when we were probably at the oldest 4 or 3.
Yeah. Yeah, and that...
And that was what, was it View to a Kill?
I'd have to look up all the years,
probably?
But right around there. But it was nothing that anybody was talking about. It was a franchise that came out every few years.
And similarly in the way Mission Impossible hibernated for a couple years, but it was off of a successful movie. Bond hibernated for like 6 or 7 off of bad movies, and then came back and GoldenEye, got in everybody's head, and then that's when, hey, we can do these every year, every 2.5 years or 3 years.
I would almost separate though the Craig movies from the rest of the franchise.
Yes, yeah. The new Bond is it's a Vaseline smeared reboot where they make tongue-in-cheek references to the fact that no, this is a continuation. Seriously, even though we're only gonna carry over characters that somehow remember that timeline.
And I guess just quick segue into the Bourne franchise, and that, like you had alluded to earlier, it's these James Bond would have not gone the direction that it had if the Bourne franchise hadn't come along and
changed the way
you can do a gritty, non-Tom Clancy spy movie that still has some cool tech in it, but nothing that's going to be crazy over the top. No spiraling cars jumping over a river. It
was usually just Fiats on walkway paths.
Yeah. So let's just talk about spy movies in general for a moment. Should the end of the Cold War have killed the spy movie? Or are we seeing enough?
Probably, but then the age of terrorism brought it back into like, hey, we have a new us versus them target, so we can pump out more of these easily.
But that doesn't work very well anymore, because I think that most people, look, I'm not a terrorist apologist, so I don't want to hear any shit about that. I am going to say, however, that instead of the typical ideological struggle that was framed as capitalism versus communism, but of course there were other, sphere of influence things going on there, it's a little easier to look and say, you know what, this terrorist may be a shitbag, but maybe us bombing his village might have been a catalyst there.
Yeah.
So there is definitely the age of terrorism. It's not like we have this clear enemy. If you go back and you look at some spy movies from the late 90s, early 2000s, what was the one? The Siege was it Denzel?
What's that? Yeah.
Yeah, the whole plot of the movie was, oh crap, we had actually trained this terrorist who then turned on us, if I'm remembering it correctly. But it's
wasn't that not that it was a spy movie, but like the Jackal, stuff like that, where it's like, oh crap, this guy was like indoctrinated to be remorseless by us.
Yeah.
And oh look, when he goes into business for himself, it really helps him out.
And then, but even if you put the Bourne movies into that entire frame, you've got the premise of the Bourne movies is agent who was turned on by their own government.
Yeah, the Bourne movies differ from other spy movies, and I think it probably is why it was successful at first, was they're very personal, because it's like his whole trilogy of the 4 of them are all about him trying to figure out who he is again.
Yes.
And that's what drives the narrative, while there is always ulterior motives going on that, give you a plot for each individual movie. It's almost always about like him trying to figure out what happened to him, who did whatever happened to him. Was it of his own volition, which is the big part of 3?
And the other part too is like in number 2, he was willing to just say, you know what, I've got an identity, I've got a life with what's her name,
Romola Run.
Yeah. So I am perfectly happy, even though we're on the run, just sort of fading into obscurity. Leave me alone. And then they dragged him back in. Bourne, on the other hand, well, look at look at Goldeneye, the one that really, like you said, revitalized it. That was more of a personal story. That was him and Trevelyan, and that kind of almost reminds me of the whole dynamic in Skyfall, of the betrayed or perceived with Javier Bardem.
Mm-hmm. The idea of like you invest all this goodwill into me, and then I'm still just a burn at the end.
Right.
Oh, just disavow basically. But no, I think that's that's in the way how I think the Bourne series informed what people wanted out of a fresher Bond was. We want this to be more about the character instead of him being having more passive role in bigger narratives. Him just being an engine of plot instead of something that reacts to or actually pushes the plot. Which is unfortunate because the movie that torpedoed anything had probably what could have been the best premise for that, which is Quantum of Solace.
Oh,
but the writer's strike and just that movie kind of torpedoed the idea of wait, Bond cared about the Bond girl?
Yeah, and let's face it, that movie's greatest sin was being so forgettable.
Which, if that's the only thing that you get out of it, considering how it was harmed by the writing strike, that's good, I guess. But that's the one you always skip typically.
So let's frame the rest of this conversation, because we could go back pretty far if we wanted to and talk about early Bond, which at this point isn't quite as relevant.
Yeah. Well, for early Bond, you usually just kind of like the Roger Moore eras where it starts getting a little out of hand.
Yeah, you've got the era of Connery, which is just classic, and at this point, as long as you're willing to look past the blatant chauvinism and even rape, I believe, in one of them.
Yeah, attempted.
Yeah.
At least. Multiple movies, I think.
So we're going to leave that as a relic of the past, and we're going to try to keep this a little bit more modern. You could start with Brosnan, but let's face it, there's one good movie, and then it goes off the rails.
Yeah, so, Brosnan had the accelerated Roger Moore timeline.
Yeah. So if you want to take it as just Daniel Craig movies, with a special nod to Goldeneye.
Yeah. For basically making those movies possible, honestly.
The Bourne franchise and the Mission Impossible movies, even though Goldeneye and the first Mission Impossible were contemporary, we're going to ignore that part of the timeline for now. Because, like you said, we really get the revival years later with Mission Impossible 2. So, I'm just going to ask, of the three, which is the best?
Well, consistency-wise, at this point, it probably is the Mission Impossible movies, just because while they do kind of blend together, if you haven't seen them all relatively recently, they don't get hokey.
No.
And no, I think Abrams coming in for, 3? Did he come in for 3?
Yes, I think that was his big directorial debut, too.
Yeah, right off of Lost, probably.
Yeah. Yeah,
around that 2003, 2005, maybe.
Give or take.
I don't know. But... And then him kind of taking, full creative control with Tom Cruise. And Tom Cruise being the type to not want to not do that anymore. To not want to be I've had enough of these movies. Him still being a driving force of, no, I like playing this character. I like doing these stories. I think that's what helps that franchise more. I mean, look at the supposed tense situation there is with Roger Craig. I like being James Bond, but I don't like being typecast as James Bond. I want to be able to do other stuff again. So that role carries a lot of that weight on your career, to where denying it, the Idris Elba rumors, people are in his face about that possibly, and it's you don't want to take that payday or whatever. What's wrong with James Bond that you don't want to do it, and it's that's not the Ethan Hunt character, because that character in our minds is only ever going to be Tom Cruise, which helps him in that sense.
Yeah, good. I didn't really think of it that way.
And because that character, though he is integral to that role, it's Ethan Hunt's just good at his job. There's nothing of his character that like.
Does he? He doesn't really have much of a character.
No. He just likes to ride motorcycles and run really fast, like Tom Cruise. But that character itself is not the real draw. It's what they're gonna do with his team, and it's a team every time, which is nice too about the Mission Impossible movies. Bond goes off the rails a bit because it's a one man army, but I mean that's the fun of how the classical spy movie influence with Bond still translating in a way that's believable. And a lot of the reason is because of the Bourne franchise revitalized what a singular super spy could be like.
Let's backtrack a little to the newest Bond stuff. I think what's hurting the newest Bond is that despite the fact that Casino Royale and Skyfall are two of the highest points in the entire history of the franchise, they got this idea in their head that it was time to do a soft reboot.
Yeah. Wasn't that a lot of because of MGM closing?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know the backstory of it. I haven't looked that up. But you get soft reboot, just every symptom of it. Like you try to bring back Spectre, but now you're, for the first time that I can think of, you're reintroducing a villain of Blofeld.
Yeah, with the same character. In that universe, if it is a contiguous universe, the same character shows up again, so it's clearly a reboot.
And I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, I don't give a shit when it comes to continuity. Mad Max. I don't care. The same actor.
Well,
played the gyro.
Bond movies are good with continuity only in the sense that they'll use it when it serves that story, or if it serves a joke, like a one-off.
Well, there's been a fan theory, which was kind of shot by Skyfall, that James Bond was a code name that you got along with the code number of 007.
Yeah. You move into a 00 agent role and you assume the identity of that role.
James Bond, right? And I'd always really liked that theory. I think it was Lee something. The guy. What was the one with the invisible car?
Invisible car. I don't know.
The Pierce Brosnan one with the invisible car.
Oh God, was that Die Another Day, or I don't know, but it was the Ice Castle and Stupidity. Yeah.
Whoever the director was of that movie actually liked the theory of the James Bond code name thing.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that you could have run with that, because then you could put to bed any bullshit complaints about Idris Elba has the wrong amount of melatonin to play James Bond.
No, I think it's one of those, like, as long as you don't have to acknowledge it, but you can kind of assume it's the reality to a certain degree. If you really have this feeling of you have to fudge that entire character's history, which is impossible because they had paper in the 60s, they could have documented, MI6 would have documented his missions in the 60s.
And beyond that, you've got M with Judi Dench,
which is a rotating title.
Yes, that goes from Pierce Brosnan into Daniel Craig, and then you see Daniel Craig's first mission where he gets his license to kill and everything like that. So, honestly,
it's a reboot.
It's the one time that I wish a franchise would have actually said, you know what, no, we're going to pay attention to continuity. Because going back and trying to redo Blofeld and Spectre and all that...
Well, the Craig Bond reboot has its own internal continuity. Every one of those movies flows in with as long as he's the Bond. If they're going to recast the Bond, I would just do another continuity with the new Bond. Or finally acknowledge the code name.
It would require some retconning. I understand
which they're good at because they've made 30 some odd movies, it seems. But no, getting back to what we were trying to talk about, I think the personal element of the Bourne franchise was what the Bond franchise needed, which is why the Craig movies are far more personal as far as that character goes. His failings are less throwaway joke lines like they were in past Brosnan movies and stuff.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
misogynist dinosaur was just a throwaway joke line, but it's like no, that's a part of that version of Bond.
Yeah.
And they pretty much they right away, almost the beginning of ever, at least the first three, I think, Craig Bond movies are like you're too old for this kind of work, and you're getting sloppy, and you're also kind of a sociopath. So I don't know if we want you in this role anymore. Like they really do make his personal failings as a character relevant to why they're reluctant to always send him on missions, which is why. And I think almost all the Craig movies he goes rogue.
It's at some point. I mean, they bring him back into the fold.
Yeah.
It's not like he's been disavowed like Ethan Hunt.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird that you mentioned that, too, because you could argue that Ethan Hunt is a sociopath. He has one friend.
Yeah.
What, Ving Rhames?
Yeah.
It's just
Simon Pegg is kind of warped into his to a second one.
Yeah.
But then again, a lot of that's informed by the fact that he was completely betrayed by the person who brought him in the first place in the first movie. So keeping almost everybody at arm's length makes sense for that character. And narrative-wise, it always makes you, as a viewer, expect... Hey, we've been seeing, like, Jeremy Renner for 3 movies. But Jeremy Renner typically plays the dickbag character. Which movie is the one where he turns on him? Like, when does he go Jean Reno on them? Maybe they're playing that for 2 movies, and then he goes bad. Like, I think that's an integral part of those movies is you want to always keep his allies at arm's length. Especially in the movie they appear, you almost always expect them to be the bad guy in the end.
Speaking of Jeremy Renner, he also played
the not Jason Bourne.
The not Jason Bourne. I know you said you didn't watch that whole movie.
I remember him being in a cabin and freaking out because he didn't get his pills dropped. And I was like, yeah, this movie kind of sucks.
That whole movie was a 2-hour introduction to a movie that never happened.
Really?
It was... the way I remember it going down was just one set piece after another, building up into a plot that never gets fully actualized. Yeah. It was... It could have led to a decent sequel if they would have done one, but you would have to watch the movies back to back. Because nothing actually happened in that movie other than generic action with a decent action star with a slight cameo by the name of Jason Bourne.
It's almost like what would be in a novel series, like in the same world as this.
It's like when they started ghostwriting. It's like when they started ghostwriting all of those Tom Clancy, and then right underneath, in the smallest letter possible, it's a novel by a random person you've never heard of, because Tom Clancy's been dead for a decade, but we're gonna keep using his name because he's a brand now.
Yeah, and it's that universe of characters at this point.
But let's talk Jason Bourne versus Ethan Hunt, because not even the characters, just the franchises. Because you've got one franchise that starts amazing, stays amazing, and then falls off, and then you bring Matt Damon out of the stable to do a movie that I don't think he wanted to do. Yeah. That movie could have been any generic spy thriller, but you had to put
we have to reestablish brand again, so we need you to come in for one more.
So that's been...
Yeah.
And it's crazy to think that you've got that much potential, and I think there was some other source material that they might have been able to go on, but it was just, I'm here because I'm guessing contractually obligated or needed a payday, and it falls off the rails. And at the same time, you've got Mission Impossible, which should have gone full Fast and the Furious.
Oh yeah,
we're 6 movies in.
It's the similar timeline of like we said, you see the trailer and you're like, another one? These keep making money, but then you realize, it's not always the first thing I want to see, but every time you do end up finally sitting down and seeing one, you're like, no, that actually was, it maintained interest and it was good. And you're just like, oh wow, it's weird because it's like, what if RC Cola was the most consistently good and popular cola?
That is the best analogy that
Yeah.
yeah.
It's the one that when if you're playing Family Feud, it's not the one that people are gonna say. It's gonna be the third
or fourth.
option. Yeah. And it's still the most consistent and probably still the most money drawing if they still do it. And I'm wondering if a lot of that, like I said, is on Cruise still wanting to do them and having the mega star power that he has, that anything he wants to make gets made. And anything he's associated with, regardless of quality, like The Mummy, ends up making money here or overseas. And having somebody like J.J. Abrams, who on the creative side is enough to probably either rein him in or encourage him enough to get it to a point where it is quality. It's not just the same old rigmarole every couple of years. They do something different enough that you're left surprised.
All right, now mark your calendars because you're going to hear me say something that I would never usually say. But I'm going to have to give the victory in this, 3 franchise battle to Mission Impossible because it's the most fun.
No, I get that.
And it's
forgetting memory dumping the John Woo Mission Impossible.
Oh God, but even then, it's kind of like Aliens, where you've got all these different directors coming in and making their own version of this character, and for better or for worse, it's a John Woo movie.
Yes, it definitely is a John.
If you enjoy John Woo movies, you should watch this movie. You should have the Blu-ray version, and you should watch it on a regular basis if you're a John Woo fanboy, because it is. What's more John Woo, that or Face Off? What is the most John Woo of the John Woo movies?
Well, it's like he transcended to a new transformation level, because it's like you've got doves in chapels in cinematic gunfights, and then you get to Mission Impossible 2, and it's we're gonna have doves, cinematic gunfights while doing nose manuals on crotch rockets.
Yeah,
like it just gets more and more absurd.
So wow. I never thought I'd say that we got to the point where Mission Impossible has become the premier, both in money making and entertainment, even acting wise. You've got some decent, actually thrilling set pieces.
Yeah. Well, I think what really helps it there is you have 2 creative pillars that are the constants there in Abrams now and in Cruise. Mm-hmm. And the supporting cast is well-known and popular modern actors.
Yeah, Ving Rhames is great.
Yeah.
You had a great support character in Henry Cavill with his real mustache.
Ooh, yeah.
That was the movie that was being filmed at the same time as Batman Superman.
I'm glad that it was no, this is more important than Zack Snyder's garbage.
And it was.
Yeah.
Having seen you know what? Whatever. You can keep your CG removed. I'm glad that he had the real mustache for this movie. And then you had Simon Pegg, and everyone thinks of him as the comedy relief, but I think he's got to the point in his career where he doesn't want to be seen as a comedic actor.
Yeah,
and he's actually bringing more.
No, I think he's trying to transition more into doing the writing aspect, especially with what he did with Star Trek.
Yeah,
I think he wants to transition more into we got into this because we wrote stuff. And it ended up being humorous, and that made money. And now I kind of want to just get into the writing aspect of it and occasionally act again. But and then who else do you have? Michelle Monaghan is his wife. And it's like you could have just gotten any actress to play that character, but no, you got a quality actress that has chops.
And now in these last 2 movies, you've got a foil for Ethan Hunt to play off of, and it's killing me. I can't remember her name, but she is basically the Irene Adler of the Sherlock universe.
Yeah.
To Ethan Hunt, which could have been a throwaway character, but it actually gave the movie a little bit more. Yeah. I'm not going to say depth. That's the word I'm going to use. I'm going to use the word depth. I don't mean in terms of deep cinematic whatever. I just mean it gave it another level to play off of. Yeah.
And but I think that essentially sums up why that franchise continues to chug along prosperously, Bond is different because Bond is fond of constantly trying to change. That's why it was nice to have the Craig movies where there was enough tie-in. At least at first, it got a little bit lesser as that went on, and as it definitely diminished in quality by the time that Spectre came out. But no, Bond always has a feel of like it's going to be a long-term relationship, but it's not a permanent relationship with anybody involved in it. I think it's because Bond has to be timeless, so they want to keep up with trends as much as possible. So, you know, to us, we might be as interested in 20 more years when they do a new version, because they'll eventually do another version of Bond, and maybe it'll be as good as we remember the Craig stuff, or maybe it'll make the Craig stuff seem hokey, which honestly I don't think could happen that well. But
no, it's tough to make a movie about playing poker to fund terrorism. As bizarre as that sounds, it's I don't think you'll ever see it as hokey because they kept a very, even if it's absurd, fairly grounded premise.
Yeah.
You're playing a poker game.
Yeah. But I think the Bourne trilogy is going to suffer the most because, or trilogy, 4 and 1. Yeah, 4 and 1 that we don't name. But I think that's the one that's going to fade the most because it is based off of books and there really isn't much more to go to that well with.
No. I think the craziest part about that, though, is that if you took the 5th one, just Jason Bourne, and you use that plot, it had nothing to do with Bourne's backstory. You just use that plot and you put Ethan Hunt into that, it would have been a fine movie.
Yeah.
Because, you know what? It's generic spy action. Different actor, different everything, none of the baggage of Bourne, and it could have been perfectly fine.
Yeah.
As a mid-level Mission Impossible movie.
Yeah. The Bourne franchise is one that was good when it was good, but I think it's run its course at this point, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just it's not going to have the lasting impact other than those of us who were around for it seeing not references, but seeing the trends that it introduced to the other spy franchises.
And just shaky cam in general.
Yeah.
Which is
what?
A mixed legacy.
Was Greengrass all of those?
I'd have to look it up, but my gut says yes.
First one, at least the first couple.
So I guess to sum up where we're at, I mean, the current state of the spy genre is you've got the Bourne franchise, hopefully rest in peace.
Yeah.
You in your old age, you
Bond
got
is
a little
perpetual.
crazy.
It's always going to be there in some form or another. It'll go through ebbs and flows, but luckily right now we're coming off of a good resurgence. I think they have an idea of what they want to do with it.
Because if you look at the quality of the movies, the best
it's parabolic. It's definitely parabolic. Well, no. It's a down slope because Casino Royale was great. I think you could forgive Quantum because of stuff that happened regarding making it.
Skyfall I loved.
Skyfall is awesome.
And then it dropped again precipitously with Spectre.
Yeah, Spectre's okay. Spectre felt rote. It felt like a rote Bond movie using a character that transcended rote Bond movie.
Oh no. Do you know what Spectre is reminding me of?
What?
The DCU.
Oh.
It's the, hey, franchises are a thing. We are connected franchises.
Yeah.
We are going to try to turn this into something bigger and more connected than it ever should have been.
Yeah.
These should have been standalones with a little bit of thread between them versus we're going to try to tie everything back together, kind of like Robert Heinlein novels at the end of his career. And then somehow, against all odds, Mission Impossible being fun, being somewhat gritty, being well acted, and having some of the best stunts and set pieces. And outside of, say, Fury Road, I would say that Mission Impossible has done the most to promote traditional real stunts more than anything else that's come out in recent years.
Yeah. That's an entirely different angle to take on it, but yeah, those are the main modern three. I'd say the big three moderns. Bourne feels like old at this point, and it's not really.
because the only other way you can go with spy stuff in general is something excellent like The Americans, but that's episodic, more of a
Episodic
family,
works better for something.
and that's more of almost a family drama than a big spy movie.
Yeah.
It had the set piece, really cool scenes from time to
Cl-
time. But this is
Clever
we're
modern
talking-
one-offs are not odd though.
Yeah, we're talking something very different from the franchises we're talking about, and now they're trying to do a resurgence of Jack Ryan.
Yeah.
Which honestly, that just from the previews, the new Jack Ryan series just feels like something stuck in the George W. Bush era. And does that make sense?
Yes,
I mean,
yeah. It feels like it's trying to talk to a people that have already kind of grown up from that.
Because what was the last one? Some of All Fears was that 04, give or take.
Was that or wasn't? No, there was the one with Chris Pine, the reboot one.
Oh my god, I totally forgot about that.
Yep.
Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the state of that. That's the state of the Clancyverse cinematically at this point.
Oh shit.
Yeah, the most recent one was the forgettable one.
Yeah, I mean having Middle Eastern terrorists. I think that's what was in Some of All Fears. Getting, or was it Russians?
I don't know. It's been so long.
Whatever. Someone got a bomb into a football game, but it was really playing off of a lot of the early 2000s,
early post 9/11.
Yes, fears, and it was very much a product of its time. And I honestly don't think that anything Tom Clancy, because that's the world that Tom Clancy knew, late Cold War and immediately after. That's all that he had, and to keep trying to readapt that. I think it's time to just put a bullet into that entire verse in general.
Yeah.
Look back on it fondly because Hunt for Red October was great, and just leave it at that. Yeah. Any closing thoughts on?
Well, yeah. There are I guess what we have dubbed as the modern big three. Granted, it's big two at this point, really. But there's always stuff that comes out that is informed from all of them. The two that come to mind are the severely underrated The Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Thank you. I was hoping you'd bring that up.
Which I think does the great. We're gonna do this super stylistic, and I love that about it.
It was Guy Ritchie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for some reason people hate it, and I don't understand it. And then if you want unique, good sort of indie, watch Hannah. Hannah's really cool.
I didn't. Oh, The Elephant in the Room, by the way.
Yes.
Is The Kingsman. Which, The Kingsman, the first one is one of those movies that once
Golden Circle is...
garbage. Utter trash. The first one, though.
Kingsman, the Secret Service? Was that what it was called? Kingsman, the Secret Service, right?
Something like that.
Somehow was able to walk the line of being just this side of Spaceballs. In terms of being like, no, we're totally going to tell a serious story and have it be acted seriously, but you're going to recognize that it's absurd. And then Golden Circle just is absurd. The whole movie is just absurd.
It was one of those movies where, unfortunately, they did it because, we're going to put this in 3D and make it unwatchable on home video. And the plot just... It lost everything from the first one.
Here's what I get out of... Here's all I'm going to say about Golden Circle. Actors having a lot of fun together doesn't always mean the final product is good.
I heard that the Ghostbusters reboot, they had fun filming.
Yeah. There we go. But yeah, what looks like a lot of people having a lot of fun doesn't necessarily mean the end product is anything quality. And that's what Golden Circle seemed to me. And
the first Kingsman, though, once I figured out what they were going for, the first little bit of that movie, the first time I watched it, I wasn't sold. Yeah. Then when I realized exactly what they were doing, paying homage and going just over the top enough to be a little tongue-in-cheek while still telling actually what turned out to be a decent
enough
ish
Bondish story, basically.
Yeah. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would.
Yeah. The first one only.
Right.
But yeah. It's not a genre that I think is going to disappear. It's going to just constantly change. But like I said, there's going to be, at least as long as Tom Cruise is able to run at full speed, there's going to be Mission Impossible movies as long as they are quality and keep making money and those in the people involved aren't sick of it, and then Bond's is going to be here until we're dust. I think. Whenever if a studio needs something to put out in November, and that for some reason that franchise is changing hands, somebody's going to pick it up and somebody's going to do something with it. So it's going to be there forever.
And hopefully they find a decent actor. I understand what you said about Idris Elba not wanting to be.
Well, yeah, just in terms of that being what that franchise is most known for is who's the lead role. Who's the lead role is the most important thing. Whereas Mission Impossible is, all right, what's the cool stunt? How much fun is this movie going to be at the end of summer? It helps it a lot.
Once they announce the official casting choice for the next Bond, we can address it then.
Yeah.
I'd be okay if Idris Elba decides to backpedal and takes the role, because I think he's got that. He's a little bit more of a. He's got that gruff, almost gruff exterior, kind of like Craig. He'd be a suaver Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
Which I think is a good direction for the franchise to go. All right. So I think that's about everything I wanted to touch on. We could always come back to this at some other point. I grew up watching James Bond movies, so I've always loved this genre, and it's been kind of neat seeing it from the era of schlock into the era of gritty reboot. What works, what doesn't.
Yeah.
And
how your own tastes change. How the older you get, the more annoyed you are that there is like some magical MacGuffin gadget, and you're like, that was why I wanted to watch these movies as a kid, because his watch shot bombs, and now you're like, oh, why does the watch do that? This is stupid. This is the workaround for something that actually needs to happen story-wise.
All right, thanks for listening. We will hopefully be back shortly with more content for our handful of loyal listeners. Thanks for listening.